Does the act of coding truly have the power to save the world? This is a powerful question, and I believe my story can help us answer this. Last year, 2023, I was interviewed about my life story. The chat was meant to be brief, focusing on my career, education, income, and overall life trajectory, growing up in Nigeria and then moving to Canada. As we wrapped up, the interviewer looked at me curiously and asked, "Who are your parents?" Well, my response wasn't what he expected because I come from a family that hovers between the low and the middle classes. My parents are not civil servants. In fact, my daddy is a clergyman and runs his block industry on the outskirts of Ogun State, Nigeria. The interviewer was quite amazed because we've been discussing how, despite my young age, I have managed to achieve quite a bit. I served my siblings, considering the impoverished state of our background and how people have difficulty breaking out of poverty because of the influence this environment had on their upbringing. In my hometown, only a few come from there and make a mark. For instance, when I wrote my high school final year exam in my all-girls school, several of my classmates wrote the exam with their big bellies and pregnancies. The few innocent ones among us would laugh at them, and I personally would shake my head in quiet judgment as to what I saw as their poor choices. Another example was cases of cybercrimes. I grew up among kids with uncles, nephews, cousins involved in cybercrimes. We used to call it Yahoo Yahoo. Some of these kids went to their uncle's place for holidays or a neighbor's house to watch night movies. Then they were taught the concept of frauding people to make money. Now these kids have grown to make cybercrime a lifelong profession. My daddy's church was in a town in Abeokuta, Nigeria. The parents in his church were extremely religious. They would bring their kids over to church for prayer sessions. We attended teenage Sunday school together. We were all age mates, rolling and playing together. But many of these kids grew up without ambition, trapped by mediocrity, and unable to see beyond their circumstances. You know, this is not an issue unique only to my background because it can happen anywhere in the world. For instance, when I walk through downtown Ottawa specifically, it strikingly reminds me of places like Mushin in Lagos. Despite the geographical distance, both places share the same harsh reality, where young people grow up trapped in a cycle that seemed almost predestined by their environment. This is not an exception, it is the norm. Now, let's go back to the environment I grew up in. We were clearly among these other kids, but what made the difference for me and my siblings? How did we escape fate seemingly predestined by our environment? Was this something in our gene? Well, that's one question we need to answer, and I will come back to it. I wanted to become a medical doctor all my life. I loved everything about medicine and healthcare. My dad once wanted to put me into learning auxiliary nursing as a trade at one point, but due to my big mindset, I just laughed at him because he clearly could not measure the extent to which his daughter's mind had grown. I was a medical rehabilitation student at Obafemi Awolowo University, Nigeria, until I realized how computer science can help me address some of the healthcare challenges that plague the world today. A friend of mine in high school watched her dad die of diabetes after he stumbled and fell on an unfortunate evening, causing a wound that failed to heal, leading to his death. Another was my friend's mom, who died while giving birth. The baby she gave birth to was diagnosed with a diabetes, and up to now, we still don't know if he will fully recover. All of these things crept into my consciousness. People are dying. How are we going to solve this? I started learning to code in my spare time thanks to my brother, who introduced me to tech at the age of 17. This made me realize computer science might actually be a faster path to solving these types of problems. Elixir was my first project in 2020, 8 months after I started coding. It was an idea birthed during the Tanzania AI Lab Hackathon. Myself and 3 Tanzanian coders had looked into how to prevent further death of women in Tanzania due to cervical and breast cancer. As the only machine learning engineer on the team, I built an algorithm from images of cancerous and non-cancerous lesions to help aid early diagnosis. We achieved 92% accuracy, and we handed it over to the Tanzanian government through AI Commons. My second code project to save lives was to help women suffering from online harassment. I used the Google Women Hackathon as an opportunity to build safe cyber in 2021. Then I started to delve deeper into a common traumatic brain injury called concussion. It happens when the brain is jostled inside the skull through an impact from outside, like a fall or a hit, causing the brain to move back and forth, potentially damaging or stretching the brain cells. The world currently does not have an efficient way to diagnose this, so my current research focuses on building a better diagnostic protocol for this true code. Well, now let's take a look at all this. I bypassed different societal issues that mostly happen to young boys and teenage girls of my age, despite how susceptible I could have been. I crawled and climbed to the very top of the ladder, up to the point that I could positively contribute to the world. How does someone from my background achieve this? Let me review what I found. The act of writing code is more than just a technical skill. It can revolutionize your mind, it can change your thinking, and give you a growth mindset many people from our environment did not have. It holds immense power to liberate you from the quagmire of confusion and set you on a path of purpose and clarity. When I came to Canada in 2022, I wrote an article titled, "Tech Took Me Out of the Ghetto." But let me give you a literal meaning of that today. A ghetto is not just a poor urban area filled with minority groups. The ghetto here is your mind, your thinking, your perceptions of your limitations, and your level of awareness of the possibilities out there. In this sense, you can only be a minority if your mind is a minority. You can only be a minority if your mind is a minority. Then, we could also ask this question. I believe we all have the question now. How does coding achieve this huge mind transformation task? I will give you 3 points. A coder writes instructions to a computer by describing the information needed to perform a particular task. We break systems apart in order to understand the imperative logic that glues them together. In the process, we encounter bugs. Debugging itself is like an archaeology of quirks from programs layered on top of older programs. And then there is a real joy where we successfully debug and unlock a path forward. This process, this clarity, develops into confidence over time. And with every goal we achieve, we build a foundation of unshakable confidence. And we start seeing the application of this in our whole lives. Secondly, a researcher named Kenji Ishikawa published a paper titled "Changes in Functional Brain Activity Patterns Associated with Computer Programming Learning." It confirmed neuroplasticity as the brain's remarkable ability to restructure and form new neural pathways through extensive right hemispheric involvement while learning or debugging code. These new neural pathways give the mind freedom to expand, and it carries into other areas of a programmer's life. Lastly, coding is bound by rules because it is an exercise in precision and adherence to a set of predefined notations and logics. It is a discipline that naturally cultivates a mindset of meticulousness and orderliness. It goes beyond the digital realm. A research in cognitive psychology shows that engaging in activities requiring rule-based logic, such as coding, can enhance one's ability to apply disciplined approaches and structured thinking to various life situations. And this does not at all imply rigidity, but rather shows a balance between boundaries of logical constraint and freedom. So, I wish I had this answer when the interviewer asked me that day how I had achieved so much coming from my background. What my family found that transformed us was code. I remember watching my brother Steven back in the day run some code on his HP laptop when he started his computer science degree. I did not know what it was, but it was fascinating to see those terminals running some programs. Steven found code quickly. If nothing had brought Steven to code, I would probably be living a different life right now, following this psychological phrase that younger siblings are likely to model the behavior of older siblings. This trend was very evident in my background. I saw many cycles of mediocrity. And we could now raise a question. Did it work for you and your siblings because you guys were just great already? Well, let me show you a Reddit thread I recently stumbled upon. It asks the question, how has learning to code changed your life? About 187 comments, but I'm going to share just 2 of them with you today. The first person said, code basically changed the way I think about everything. Debugging code is basically just debugging your own thoughts. And a lot of us start out with buggy AF ways of thinking. The second person said they have been addicted to cocaine, opiates, benzodiazepine, and ended up in a coma for 2 months. They embraced coding and decided to go back to college for computer science. Then, they said they have not touched drugs since. With this, I believe we all can conclude that code is not money, but it can transform the mind and change lives. Code is also not medicine, but it has the power to cure and heal. Code is also not government, the way I would put it, but it has the power to reduce the growth of global and healthcare challenges in the world. Because this is what Assemble means to us in the tech space. So, as you are leaving this room today, I invite you to reconsider coding, your perceptions of people who code, and the power of coding to transform the mind. Because in the end, it is not just about coding, it is about unlocking what is within you to change your life and in turn change the world. Thank you.